In a world that never stops talking, where everyone is shouting for attention, where social media demands constant noise and validation, there exists a quiet revolution happening right under our noses. While the loud ones grab the headlines and the extroverts dominate the conversations, there's a group of people who have discovered something profound, something that the ancient masters knew but modern society has forgotten. They've learned the incredible power of working in silence. Think about this for a moment. Who built the greatest empires? Who created the most revolutionary inventions? Who accumulated the most wealth? Was it the loudest person in the room, or was it someone working quietly in the background, observing, planning, and executing with precision? History tells us a different story than what popular culture wants us to believe. Today, you're going to discover why quiet people don't just succeed, they dominate. You're going to learn why working in silence isn't a weakness, but perhaps the greatest strength you can develop in our noisy, distracted world. This isn't about being antisocial or avoiding people. This is about understanding the strategic advantage of silence, the power of observation, and the incredible force that builds when you stop talking and start doing. By the end of this journey, you'll understand why the most successful people in history were often the quietest ones in the room. You'll learn how to harness this power for yourself, and you'll discover why, in a world full of noise, silence has become the ultimate competitive advantage. Chapter 1. The Myth of the Loud Leader. For decades, society has been selling us a lie. We've been told that to be successful, you need to be the loudest voice in the room. You need to be charismatic, outgoing, and always ready to speak up. Corporate culture has worshipped the extroverted leader, the one who commands attention, who can work a room, who never seems to run out of things to say. But what if everything we've been taught about leadership and success is fundamentally wrong? The truth is that some of the most powerful leaders in history were introverts who understood the immense value of silence. They didn't lead through volume. They led through substance. They didn't command through charisma alone. They commanded through competence. Think about Warren Buffett, one of the most successful investors of all time. He's not known for being the loudest person in shareholder meetings. Instead, he's known for his thoughtful analysis, his careful observation of market trends, and his ability to make decisions based on deep research rather than popular opinion. Consider Bill Gates, who built Microsoft into a tech empire. He wasn't the most charismatic speaker or the most outgoing personality in Silicon Valley. What made him extraordinary was his ability to focus intensely on problems, to work for hours in silence, diving deep into complex technical challenges while others were networking at parties. His power came not from his ability to charm a crowd, but from his ability to understand technology and business strategy at a level that few could match. The myth of the loud leader has created a generation of people who confuse noise with productivity, who mistake talking for doing, who believe that being heard is more important than being effective. This myth has led to boardrooms filled with people who speak just to hear themselves talk, meetings that accomplish nothing because everyone is focused on appearing important rather than solving problems, and a culture where substance is often overshadowed by style. But here's what the quiet achievers understand that the loud ones don't. Real power doesn't come from commanding attention. It comes from commanding results. True influence isn't about how many people hear you speak. It's about how many people benefit from your actions. The most powerful people in any organization are often not the ones making the most noise, they're the ones making the most difference. Think about the software engineer who quietly writes the code that powers million-dollar applications. They're not giving presentations about their work. They're not attending every networking event. They're not constantly promoting themselves on social media. But their silent contribution drives entire businesses. Their quiet work creates value that speaks louder than any sales pitch or marketing campaign. Consider the researcher who spends years in silence, diving deep into scientific problems, conducting experiments, analyzing data, and slowly building toward breakthrough discoveries. They're not giving interviews about their work while it's in progress. They're not seeking validation from colleagues every step of the way. They understand that the most important work happens in the quiet spaces, where deep thinking is possible, where real innovation occurs. The myth of the loud leader has also created a false economy of attention. We've started to believe that being visible is more important than being valuable, that being noticed is more important than being necessary. This has led to a culture where people spend more time managing their personal brand than developing their actual skills, more time networking than working, more time talking about what they're going to do than actually doing it. But quiet people understand something profound about how real success works. They know that the most important battles are won not in public forums, but in private moments of decision and action. They understand that while others are busy managing their image, they can be busy improving their reality. While others are focused on being heard, they can be focused on being effective. The quiet achievers know that there's a difference between being recognized and being respected. Recognition is often temporary and superficial. It's based on what people see and hear in the moment. But respect is earned through consistent performance, through reliability, through the ability to deliver results when it matters most. And respect, once earned, is far more valuable than recognition because it's based on substance rather than appearance. This doesn't mean that communication skills aren't important or that you should never speak up. What it means is that your words carry more weight when they're backed by action, when they're grounded in real experience, when they come from a place of knowledge rather than a need for attention. The quiet leader speaks less but says more. They understand that every word has weight, that every statement should serve a purpose, that silence itself can be a form of communication. The power of working in silence begins with rejecting the myth that you need to be loud to be successful. It starts with understanding that the most important work often happens away from the spotlight, that the most valuable contributions are often made by people who let their results speak for themselves. Once you understand this fundamental truth, you can begin to harness the incredible power that comes from focusing on substance over style, from choosing impact over image, from building your success in the quiet spaces where real work gets done. Chapter 2. The Psychology of Silence and Power. To understand why quiet people win, we need to dive deep into the psychology of silence and how it creates power. Silence isn't just the absence of noise. It's a deliberate choice that activates powerful psychological mechanisms, both within yourself and in how others perceive and respond to you. When you understand these mechanisms, you can use silence as a strategic tool to build influence, create respect, and achieve your goals more effectively than those who rely on constant communication. The first psychological principle of silence is its relationship to observation. When you're not talking, you're listening. When you're not performing, you're absorbing. This gives quiet people an enormous informational advantage. While others are focused on what they're going to say next, quiet people are gathering data. They're reading body language. They're understanding the underlying dynamics of conversations. They're picking up on the subtle cues that reveal what people really think and feel. This observational power creates what psychologists call situational awareness. Quiet people develop an almost supernatural ability to understand the room, to sense the mood, to pick up on tensions and opportunities that others miss. They become experts at reading between the lines, at understanding not just what people say, but what they mean. Not just what they do, but why they do it. This intelligence gathering creates a strategic advantage that compounds over time. Consider how this works in a business meeting. While the extroverted participants are focused on making their points heard, the quiet person is analyzing the group dynamics. They notice who defers to whom, who has real influence versus who just has a title, who is genuinely committed versus who is just going through the motions. They understand the political landscape, the personal motivations, the hidden agendas. By the time they do speak, they have a complete understanding of the situation that allows them to be precise, strategic, and effective. The second psychological principle is the power of mystery. Humans are naturally curious about what they don't understand. When someone is quiet, others become interested in their thoughts, their opinions, their perspectives. This creates what psychologists call the scarcity effect. Because quiet people share their thoughts less frequently, when they do speak, their words carry more weight. They become more memorable, more impactful, more influential. Think about how this plays out in social situations. The person who talks constantly becomes background noise. People tune them out because they know they can predict what's coming. But the quiet person who speaks occasionally and thoughtfully captures attention. When they share an insight or make a comment, people listen because they know it will be worth hearing. Their rarity creates value. This scarcity principle also applies to emotional expression. Quiet people tend to be more controlled in their emotional displays, which makes their emotions more powerful when they do show them. A smile from someone who rarely smiles means more than a smile from someone who smiles constantly. Approval from someone who rarely gives it carries more weight than approval from someone who approves of everything. The third psychological principle is the relationship between silence and perceived competence. Research in social psychology shows that people who speak less in group settings are often perceived as more competent, more thoughtful, and more trustworthy. This is because silence is associated with careful consideration, with taking time to think before acting, with having the confidence to let others talk while you assess the situation. This perception creates what researchers call the strong silent type effect. People assume that quiet individuals have good reasons for their silence, that they're processing complex information, that they're operating from a position of knowledge and confidence. This assumption works in favor of quiet people, giving them a psychological advantage in negotiations, leadership situations, and competitive environments. The fourth principle is the power of internal focus. While extroverted people often derive their energy and validation from external sources, quiet people develop strong internal guidance systems. They become less dependent on external approval, less influenced by social pressure, more capable of making decisions based on their own analysis rather than popular opinion. This internal strength creates psychological resilience and independence that becomes a source of real power. This internal focus also leads to what psychologists call deep work capability. Quiet people are comfortable with solitude, comfortable with sustained concentration, comfortable with the kind of focused effort that produces exceptional results. While others need constant stimulation and social interaction, quiet people can dive deep into problems, maintain focus for extended periods, and produce work of higher quality and greater impact. The fifth principle involves emotional regulation and impulse control. Quiet people often develop superior emotional intelligence because they spend more time observing emotions rather than just expressing them. They learn to read emotional cues in others, to understand the underlying feelings that drive behavior, to manage their own emotional responses strategically rather than reactively. This emotional intelligence creates leadership capability. People trust leaders who don't react impulsively, who remain calm under pressure, who respond thoughtfully to challenges. Quiet people develop these qualities naturally through their tendency to pause, consider, and respond rather than react immediately to every stimulus. The psychology of silence also involves what researchers call cognitive load management. Our brains have limited processing capacity. When we're constantly talking, explaining, performing, we're using mental energy that could be directed toward thinking, analyzing, problem-solving. Quiet people conserve this mental energy, allowing them to think more clearly, make better decisions, and maintain higher levels of performance over time. Understanding these psychological principles allows you to use silence strategically. You can choose when to speak and when to listen. You can use mystery to create interest. You can leverage the perception of competence that comes with thoughtful silence. You can develop your internal guidance system and emotional intelligence. You can manage your cognitive load to maintain peak mental performance. The power of silence isn't just about being quiet. It's about understanding how silence works psychologically and using that understanding to create genuine influence and effectiveness. When you master these principles, you discover that silence isn't the absence of power. It's often the source of it. Chapter 3. The strategic advantage of being underestimated. One of the most powerful weapons in the quiet person's arsenal is the fact that they are consistently underestimated. In a world that equates volume with competence and visibility with value, quiet people often fly under the radar. And this apparent disadvantage is actually one of their greatest strategic advantages. When people underestimate you, they give you something invaluable: the element of surprise, the freedom to operate without interference, and the opportunity to exceed expectations in ways that create lasting impact. The strategic advantage of being underestimated begins with reduced scrutiny. When people don't see you as a threat, they don't monitor your activities as closely. They don't try to interfere with your work. They don't attempt to sabotage your efforts. They don't compete with you aggressively. This gives you the space and freedom to develop your skills, build your resources, and execute your plans without the friction and obstacles that more visible competitors face. Think about how this works in corporate environments. The loud, self-promoting employee gets attention, but they also get microscopic examination of their work. Every mistake is magnified. Every failure is public. Every move is analyzed by colleagues and superiors. But the quiet employee who consistently delivers good work operates with much less pressure. They can take risks, experiment with new approaches, learn from failures without public embarrassment, and gradually build their capabilities without the stress of constant observation. This reduced scrutiny also means that quiet people can often pursue opportunities that others overlook. While everyone is fighting for the high-profile projects and visible roles, quiet achievers can identify and capture valuable opportunities that aren't immediately obvious to others. They can build expertise in areas that seem unimportant now but become crucial later. They can develop relationships with people who aren't currently influential but have potential for future impact. The second advantage of being underestimated is the power of exceeded expectations. When people have low expectations for your performance, it becomes relatively easy to surprise them positively. And positive surprises create disproportionate impact on how you're perceived and treated. A quiet person who delivers exceptional results generates much more positive reaction than a highly promoted person who delivers the same results, because the quiet person's performance exceeds expectations, while the promoted person's performance merely meets them. This psychological principle works because of how human perception operates. We don't judge performance in absolute terms, we judge it relative to our expectations. The same level of achievement can be perceived as disappointing from someone we expected great things from, or as impressive from someone we didn't expect much from. Quiet people can leverage this bias by consistently performing better than their modest image suggests they will. Consider how this plays out in negotiations. When you enter a negotiation as the quiet, unassuming party, your counterpart may assume you're inexperienced, unprepared, or easy to manipulate. This assumption leads them to be less guarded, less strategic, more willing to reveal information they should keep private. They may underestimate your knowledge, your resources, or your alternatives. All of these mistaken assumptions work in your favor, giving you information and opportunities that a more obviously formidable opponent would never receive. The third advantage is what strategists call stealth accumulation of power. While others are engaged in visible power struggles, competing openly for resources and recognition, quiet people can build their influence through less obvious channels. They can develop expertise that makes them indispensable. They can build networks of relationships based on genuine value rather than political maneuvering. They can accumulate resources and capabilities without triggering the defensive reactions that visible power plays often provoke. This stealth approach to building power is particularly effective because it's sustainable. Power that's built through loud self-promotion or aggressive competition often creates enemies and resistance. But power that's built through quiet competence and genuine value creation tends to be more stable and enduring. People respect and support power that they perceive as earned rather than seized. Think about the software engineer who quietly becomes the only person who really understands a critical system. They didn't campaign for this position. They didn't promote themselves as the expert. They simply focused on learning and doing the work better than anyone else. Over time, they become indispensable. Their opinion carries weight not because of their title or their networking skills, but because everyone knows they understand what they're talking about. This is power built through stealth competence rather than visible positioning. The fourth advantage of being underestimated is psychological. When you know that others don't see your full capabilities, it creates a sense of confidence and control. You're playing a game where you know more about your own strengths than others do. This information asymmetry gives you strategic options that more visible players don't have. You can choose when to reveal your capabilities, when to surprise people with your knowledge or skills, when to exceed expectations for maximum impact. This psychological advantage also protects you from the pressure and stress that comes with high expectations. When people expect great things from you, it creates performance anxiety. But when expectations are low, you can perform with less pressure. Take creative risks. Experiment with new approaches without the fear of disappointing people. This psychological freedom often leads to better performance, which reinforces the cycle of positive surprises. The strategic use of being underestimated also involves timing. The quiet achiever learns to recognize when it's advantageous to remain underestimated and when it's time to reveal their true capabilities. They understand that surprise is a resource that can only be used once, so they save it for moments when it will have maximum impact. They might remain quiet and underestimated for months or years while building their capabilities, then choose a crucial moment to demonstrate their true value. Being underestimated also creates opportunities for what military strategists call asymmetric advantage. While your opponents are preparing for the threats they can see, you can develop capabilities they don't expect. While they're defending against obvious attacks, you can find unconventional approaches to achieving your objectives. The element of surprise, combined with genuine competence, can allow a quiet individual to achieve results that seem impossible based on initial appearances. The key to leveraging the advantage of being underestimated is to ensure that it's based on appearance rather than reality. You want others to underestimate your capabilities while you're actually developing real competence and value. The goal isn't to be mediocre and overlooked. It's to be excellent while flying under the radar until you choose to reveal your strength. This strategic approach requires patience, discipline, and confidence. You have to be comfortable with not getting immediate recognition for your efforts. You have to be willing to let others take credit in the short term while you build real value for the long term. But for those who can master this approach, being underestimated becomes not a disadvantage to overcome, but a weapon to wield. Chapter 4. The Deep Work Advantage. In our hyper-connected, constantly interrupted world, the ability to do deep work has become both increasingly rare and increasingly valuable. Deep work is the ability to focus without distraction on cognitively demanding tasks. It's the kind of concentrated effort that produces breakthrough innovations, solves complex problems, and creates exceptional value. And quiet people have a natural advantage in developing this crucial capability. While the noisy world demands constant attention to emails, meetings, social media, and casual conversations, quiet people are comfortable with the solitude and sustained concentration that deep work requires. They don't need constant social stimulation or external validation to maintain their motivation. They can disappear into their work for hours at a time, diving deep into problems that others find too difficult or too boring to pursue with sustained effort. This deep work advantage manifests in several powerful ways. First, it allows quiet people to develop expertise faster and more thoroughly than their more socially active counterparts. While others are spreading their attention across multiple shallow activities, quiet individuals can focus intensively on mastering specific skills or knowledge domains. This focused effort creates compound returns over time, leading to levels of expertise that seem almost superhuman to those who haven't experienced the power of sustained concentration. Consider the programmer who spends hours in flow state, completely absorbed in solving complex algorithmic problems, while their colleagues are attending meetings, checking social media, and engaging in office politics. They're building deep technical skills that become increasingly valuable. Over time, they become the person others turn to when facing the most challenging technical problems. Their ability to sustain concentration gives them capabilities that can't be easily replicated or replaced. The deep work advantage also applies to creative endeavors. The writer who can sustain focus for hours at a time produces work of greater depth and quality than someone who writes in short bursts between distractions. The artist who can lose themselves in their craft develops techniques and insights that aren't accessible to those who work in scattered fragments of time. The researcher who can maintain concentration through extensive data analysis discovers patterns and relationships that others miss. But deep work isn't just about technical or creative tasks. It also applies to strategic thinking and problem solving. The business leader who can spend uninterrupted time analyzing market trends, understanding customer needs, and developing strategic plans will make better decisions than someone who tries to do this thinking in brief moments between meetings and interruptions. Deep work allows for the kind of comprehensive analysis and creative synthesis that produces breakthrough insights. The neuroscience behind deep work explains why this advantage is so powerful. When we focus intensely on a single task, our brains enter a state that neuroscientists call flow. In this state, the prefrontal cortex partially shuts down, reducing self-consciousness and the internal critic that often interferes with performance. At the same time, the brain releases neurochemicals like dopamine and norepinephrine that enhance focus, pattern recognition, and creative thinking. This neurochemical state is difficult to achieve in our normal, interrupted work environment. Every email notification, every casual conversation, every meeting breaks the flow state and requires time to rebuild concentration. Research shows that it can take up to 23 minutes to fully refocus after an interruption. This means that people who are constantly interrupted never achieve the deep concentration states where their best work happens. Quiet people, who are naturally comfortable with solitude and less dependent on social interaction, can more easily create and maintain the conditions necessary for deep work. They can turn off notifications, close their doors, and disappear into their work without feeling anxious or isolated. They understand that this temporary disconnection from the social world is an investment in their long-term capabilities and effectiveness. The deep work advantage also creates what researchers call flow experiences more frequently. Flow is characterized by complete absorption in an activity, a sense that time passes quickly, and peak performance that feels effortless. People who experience flow regularly report higher levels of satisfaction, creativity, and achievement. Because quiet people are more likely to engage in extended periods of focused work, they experience flow more often and develop a greater capacity for sustained high performance. This advantage extends beyond individual productivity to include problem-solving capabilities. Complex problems often require sustained attention to understand all the variables, relationships, and potential solutions. The person who can maintain focus long enough to truly understand a problem's complexity is more likely to find innovative solutions. While others might give up or settle for obvious answers, the deep work practitioner can persist through the confusion and uncertainty that precedes breakthrough insights. The deep work advantage also applies to learning and skill development. Malcolm Gladwell's famous 10-0-hour rule isn't just about the total time spent practicing, it's about the quality of that practice. Deliberate practice, which leads to mastery, requires sustained concentration on specific weaknesses and challenges. Quiet people who can engage in extended focused practice sessions develop skills faster and more thoroughly than those who practice in short, scattered sessions. In our knowledge economy, where value is increasingly created through cognitive work rather than physical labor, the ability to do deep work becomes a crucial competitive advantage. The programmer who can code for 6 hours straight without distraction, the writer who can maintain narrative flow across hundreds of pages, the analyst who can work through complex data sets without losing focus. These individuals create value that can't be easily automated or outsourced. The deep work advantage also provides psychological benefits. People who regularly engage in deep work report higher levels of satisfaction and meaning in their work. This makes sense because deep work allows us to use our cognitive abilities to their fullest extent, creating a sense of accomplishment and progress that shallow work cannot provide. The quiet person who develops deep work capabilities doesn't just become more productive, they become more fulfilled. To leverage this advantage, quiet people need to be intentional about creating the conditions for deep work. This means designing work environments that minimize distractions, setting boundaries around availability and interruptions, and developing routines that support sustained concentration. It also means recognizing that deep work is a skill that improves with practice. The more you engage in focused, uninterrupted work, the better you become at maintaining concentration and producing high-quality results. The deep work advantage represents one of the most significant competitive benefits that quiet people possess in our modern economy. While others struggle with distraction and shallow work, quiet individuals can develop the rare and valuable ability to produce exceptional results through sustained concentration and focused effort. Chapter 5. Building invisible networks. While extroverted networkers work the room at conferences and social events, quiet people are building something far more powerful. Invisible networks based on genuine value, mutual respect, and authentic relationships. These networks might not be visible on social media or apparent at industry gatherings, but they are often deeper, more reliable, and more influential than the flashy connections that grab attention. The invisible network is built differently than traditional networking. Instead of collecting business cards and making small talk with as many people as possible, quiet networkers focus on creating real value for a smaller number of people. They build relationships slowly, based on competence and character rather than charm and charisma. These relationships may take longer to develop, but they tend to be more durable and more mutually beneficial. The foundation of invisible networking is what relationship experts call value-first thinking. Instead of approaching relationships with the question, "What can this person do for me?" quiet networkers ask, "What can I do for this person?" They look for ways to help others succeed, to share knowledge and resources, to make introductions that benefit people in their network. This approach creates genuine goodwill and establishes the quiet person as someone who adds value rather than someone who extracts it. This value-first approach works because it addresses a fundamental problem with traditional networking. Most people are focused on taking rather than giving. When you approach relationships with a genuine desire to help, you stand out from the crowd of people who are obviously just trying to advance their own interests. People remember those who helped them, and they're naturally inclined to reciprocate when opportunities arise. Consider how this plays out in professional environments. The quiet team member who consistently helps colleagues solve problems, who shares useful resources without being asked, who remembers important details about people's projects and follows up with relevant information. This person builds strong relationships even if they never attend networking events or participate in office politics. Their colleagues come to trust and rely on them, creating a network of advocates throughout the organization. The invisible network also benefits from what social scientists call weak ties. These are relationships with people you don't interact with regularly, but who move in different circles from your own. Quiet people often develop these weak ties through their work, their interests, or their willingness to help others. A programmer might help a marketing colleague understand technical constraints, creating a relationship that bridges different departments. A researcher might assist a startup founder with data analysis, connecting academic and entrepreneurial communities. These weak ties become incredibly valuable because they provide access to information, opportunities, and resources that aren't available within your immediate circle. The marketing person might later recommend the programmer for a freelance project with a client. The startup founder might offer the researcher a consulting opportunity or invite them to join an advisory board. These opportunities often come from unexpected directions and provide value that couldn't be accessed through traditional networking approaches. The invisible network is also built through what might be called competence networking. relationships that form around shared expertise and mutual professional respect. When quiet people become known for their competence in specific areas, they naturally attract others who are working on similar problems or who need that expertise. These relationships are based on substance rather than social skills, making them particularly strong and enduring. Think about the software engineer who becomes known for their expertise in database optimization. They might never attend industry conferences or participate in online forums, but through their work, they develop relationships with other database experts, with companies that need their skills, with vendors who want their feedback on new products. These relationships form organically around shared professional interests and create a network that's both valuable and authentic. Another crucial aspect of invisible networking is the long game approach. While visible networkers often focus on immediate returns from their relationship investments, quiet networkers understand that the most valuable relationships develop over years or even decades. They're willing to help people who can't immediately help them back, to maintain relationships during dormant periods, to invest in relationships with people who are early in their careers and might become influential later. This long-term approach creates what relationship researchers call relationship portfolios, collections of relationships at different stages of development with different types of people serving different potential purposes. The quiet networker might maintain relationships with former colleagues who have moved to different companies, with classmates who have pursued different career paths, with neighbors who work in different industries. Over time, this diverse portfolio of relationships becomes a source of opportunities, information, and support that spans multiple areas of life and career. The invisible network also benefits from the trust and discretion that quiet people naturally inspire. Because they're not constantly promoting themselves or gossiping about others, quiet people become trusted confidants. Colleagues share sensitive information with them, ask for advice on confidential matters, include them in private discussions about important decisions. This access to insider information and trusted advisor status creates influence that's far more powerful than what formal networking could achieve. The maintenance of invisible networks requires different skills than traditional networking. Instead of small talk and social performance, it requires active listening, genuine interest in others' work and challenges, reliable follow-through on commitments, and the ability to remember and act on important details about people's lives and careers. Quiet people often excel at these relationship maintenance skills because they're naturally observant and thoughtful in their interactions with others. The invisible network also provides protection and support during difficult times. When someone loses a job, faces a professional challenge, or needs advice on a difficult decision, their invisible network often provides more practical help than their visible network. The depth and authenticity of these relationships means that people are willing to go out of their way to help, to make introductions, to share opportunities, to provide honest feedback and guidance. Perhaps most importantly, the invisible network allows quiet people to build influence without having to become someone they're not. They don't have to master small talk, learn to work a room, or develop a public persona that doesn't feel authentic. They can build powerful professional relationships by being competent, helpful, and reliable, qualities that align naturally with their preferred ways of working and interacting with others. The result is a network that's both powerful and sustainable. While visible networks often require constant maintenance and performance to sustain, invisible networks based on genuine value and mutual respect tend to strengthen over time. They provide access to opportunities, information, and support that can be far more valuable than what traditional networking approaches can deliver. Chapter 6. The Art of strategic silence in communication. Most people think communication is about talking, but the masters of influence understand that the most powerful communication often happens through strategic silence. The art of strategic silence isn't about being antisocial or avoiding conversation. It's about understanding when to speak, when to listen, and when to say nothing at all. This mastery creates a level of communication effectiveness that most people never achieve. Strategic silence begins with understanding that in any conversation, the person who listens more learns more. While others are focused on making their points, planning their responses, or defending their positions, the strategically silent person is gathering intelligence. They're learning about motivations, understanding hidden agendas, picking up on emotional undertones, and identifying opportunities that others miss completely. This intelligence gathering creates enormous advantages in negotiations, sales situations, and leadership interactions. When you know more about the other person's position than they know about yours, you can make better decisions about how to proceed. The silent person often walks away from conversations with valuable information that the talkative person inadvertently revealed. But strategic silence goes beyond just listening. It also involves the deliberate use of pauses and gaps in conversation. Most people are uncomfortable with silence in social situations and will rush to fill any pause with words. The strategically silent person can use this discomfort to their advantage. By remaining quiet after asking a question, they often get more complete and honest answers than they would if they immediately moved on to the next topic. Consider how this works in job interviews. The candidate who answers questions briefly and then waits for the interviewer to continue often learns more about the role, the company culture, and the interviewer's concerns than the candidate who talks extensively. The silence creates space for the interviewer to share additional information, to reveal what they're really looking for, or to ask follow-up questions that provide insight into their priorities. Strategic silence also involves knowing when not to defend yourself. Many people feel compelled to respond to every criticism, to correct every misunderstanding, to justify every decision. But sometimes the most powerful response is no response at all. Silence can communicate confidence. It can avoid escalating conflicts, and it can force others to reconsider their positions without you having to argue your case. The timing of when you choose to break silence is equally important. When you've been quiet for an extended period, your words carry more weight. People pay attention because they know you don't speak frivolously. This means that when you do choose to speak, you can have maximum impact with minimum words. The strategically silent person becomes known for quality over quantity in their communication. This approach also creates mystery and intrigue. People become curious about what you're thinking, what you know, what your opinion might be. This curiosity gives you social power because others become invested in understanding your perspective. When you finally do share your thoughts, people are more likely to listen carefully and remember what you say. Strategic silence in meetings can be particularly powerful. While others compete for airtime and interrupt each other to make their points, the silent person can observe the group dynamics, understand the real decision-makers, and identify the optimal moment to make a contribution that influences the outcome. Often, the person who speaks least in a meeting has the most impact on the final decisions. The mastery of strategic silence also involves understanding different types of silence. There's the silence of agreement, where you remain quiet to signal consent without having to explicitly endorse something. There's the silence of disagreement, where your lack of response communicates disapproval more effectively than arguing would. There's the silence of superiority, where you remain above a discussion because engaging would diminish your position. Learning to be comfortable with silence in conversation is a skill that requires practice. Most people fill silence because they're anxious about how others will perceive them. But when you develop confidence in your ability to remain quiet, you discover that silence often communicates strength and thoughtfulness rather than weakness or disengagement. Strategic silence also applies to written communication. The email you don't send, the social media post you don't make, the response you don't give can all be forms of strategic communication. Sometimes not responding sends a clearer message than any words could convey. The art of strategic silence ultimately gives you control over conversations and relationships. Instead of reacting to what others say and do, you can choose when and how to engage. This control creates influence and respect that can't be achieved through volume or verbal cleverness alone. Chapter 7. The compound effect of consistent quiet work. While the world celebrates overnight successes and viral moments, the real power lies in the compound effect of consistent quiet work. This is the phenomenon where small, seemingly insignificant actions performed consistently over time create exponential results. The quiet person who works steadily without fanfare often achieves far more than those who work in dramatic bursts or spend their energy seeking recognition. The compound effect works because most people underestimate the power of consistency and overestimate the importance of intensity. They think that working extremely hard for short periods will produce better results than working moderately hard for extended periods. But mathematics tells us otherwise. Small improvements compounded over time create massive advantages that can't be matched by sporadic, intense effort. Consider the programmer who commits to learning something new every day. They might spend just 30 minutes each morning reading technical documentation, working through coding challenges, or experimenting with new technologies. To outside observers, this daily practice might seem insignificant compared to the colleague who occasionally pulls all-nighters working on high-profile projects. But over the course of years, the consistent learner develops a depth and breadth of knowledge that makes them invaluable. The compound effect of quiet work also applies to relationship building. The person who consistently helps colleagues, remembers important details about their lives, and follows through on small commitments builds stronger professional relationships than someone who occasionally makes grand gestures. These accumulated acts of reliability and kindness create a reputation and network of support that becomes increasingly powerful over time. This principle extends to skill development in any field. The writer who writes for 1 hour every morning for 5 years will typically produce better work and achieve more success than the writer who occasionally spends entire weekends writing intensively. The consistent practice creates muscle memory, improves decision-making abilities, and builds the kind of deep expertise that only comes from sustained engagement with challenging work. The compound effect is particularly powerful for quiet people because they're naturally suited to sustained effort rather than dramatic performances. They're comfortable with the delayed gratification that consistency requires. They don't need immediate recognition or feedback to maintain their motivation. They can work steadily toward long-term goals, while others are distracted by short-term rewards and social validation. One of the most important aspects of the compound effect is that it's largely invisible in the early stages. The daily improvements are too small to notice. The accumulated advantages aren't obvious to outside observers, and the growing capabilities are hidden beneath the surface. This invisibility means that competitors often don't recognize the threat until it's too late to catch up. Think about Warren Buffett's investment approach. He doesn't make dramatic trades or chase market trends. Instead, he consistently applies the same principles: buy quality companies at reasonable prices and hold them for long periods. This quiet, consistent approach has compounded over decades to create extraordinary wealth. While other investors were making headlines with their aggressive trading strategies, Buffett was quietly building one of the largest fortunes in history. The compound effect also creates psychological advantages. People who work consistently develop confidence in their ability to achieve long-term goals. They learn to trust the process rather than looking for immediate results. This patience and persistence become competitive advantages because most people lack the discipline to maintain consistent effort when results aren't immediately visible. The key to leveraging the compound effect is choosing the right activities to compound. Not all consistent work creates equal value. The activities that compound most powerfully are those that build capabilities, relationships, or assets that become more valuable over time. Learning compounds because knowledge builds on itself. Relationship building compounds because trust and reputation grow stronger through repeated positive interactions. Asset building compounds because resources generate returns that can be reinvested. For quiet people, the compound effect also applies to reputation building. Each instance of reliable performance, each demonstration of competence, each act of integrity adds to a growing reputation for excellence. Over time, this reputation becomes a powerful asset that opens doors, creates opportunities, and attracts resources. The quiet person doesn't need to promote themselves because their accumulated track record speaks for itself. The compound effect requires patience and faith in the process. There will be long periods where the benefits aren't visible, where others seem to be advancing faster through more dramatic means, where the quiet work feels unrewarded. But understanding the mathematics of compound growth helps maintain motivation during these periods. The person who can persist through the invisible early stages of compound growth eventually reaches a tipping point where their advantages become obvious and significant. This is why quiet people often seem to succeed suddenly after years of apparent mediocrity. The success isn't sudden at all. It's the inevitable result of consistent compound growth, finally becoming visible to outside observers. The overnight success was actually years in the making, built through thousands of small improvements and consistent efforts that no one was paying attention to. The compound effect of consistent, quiet work ultimately creates what might be called inevitable success. When you work consistently on the right things for long enough, success becomes not just possible but mathematically certain. This certainty gives quiet people a calm confidence that others mistake for arrogance but is actually just faith in the power of compound growth. Chapter 8. Mastering the Art of Observation. While most people are focused on being seen and heard, quiet people develop one of the most valuable skills in human interaction: the art of observation. This skill goes far beyond casual people watching. It's the ability to read situations, understand motivations, predict behaviors, and identify opportunities through careful attention to details that others miss. Masters of observation become incredibly effective at navigating complex social and professional environments. The foundation of observational mastery is learning to quiet your internal commentary. Most people spend conversations planning what they'll say next, judging what others are saying, or thinking about unrelated topics. The master observer learns to silence this internal noise and focus completely on what's happening in the present moment. This mental discipline allows them to pick up on subtle cues that others miss entirely. Effective observation involves multiple layers of awareness. There's the verbal layer, what people are actually saying. But there's also the vocal layer, how they're saying it, including tone, pace, and emphasis. There's the physical layer, body language, facial expressions, and gestures. And there's the contextual layer, understanding the situation, the relationships between people, and the underlying dynamics that influence behavior. Master observers learn to read inconsistencies between these different layers. When someone's words say one thing but their body language suggests something else, there's usually valuable information in that discrepancy. The person who says they're excited about a project while displaying tense body language and speaking in a flat tone might actually have serious concerns they're not expressing directly. The art of observation also involves understanding patterns in human behavior. People are largely predictable once you understand their motivations, fears, and decision-making processes. The quiet observer who pays attention over time can often predict how people will react in different situations, what arguments will persuade them, and what approaches will be most effective in working with them. This predictive ability creates enormous advantages in business and personal relationships. The salesperson who can read customer hesitation before it's verbally expressed can address concerns proactively. The manager who notices early signs of employee frustration can intervene before problems escalate. The negotiator who recognizes when their counterpart is ready to compromise can time their proposals for maximum effectiveness. Observational skills also extend to understanding group dynamics. In any meeting or social gathering, there are always multiple conversations happening simultaneously. There's the official conversation about the stated topic, but there are also unofficial conversations about power, status, alliances, and personal agendas. The master observer can track all these conversations simultaneously and understand how they interact to influence outcomes. Consider how this works in a corporate meeting. While most participants focus on the official agenda, the quiet observer notices who defers to whom, who makes eye contact with whom when controversial topics arise, who checks their phone when certain people are speaking. These observations reveal the real power structure, the hidden alliances, and the actual decision-making process. Information that's far more valuable than anything in the official meeting notes. The development of observational skills requires intentional practice. Start by choosing one aspect of human behavior to focus on for a week. You might focus on vocal patterns, noticing how people's voices change when they're excited, nervous, or uncertain. Or you might focus on facial expressions, learning to recognize micro-expressions that reveal true emotions. Over time, these focused observations become automatic and integrate into a comprehensive understanding of human behavior. Master observers also learn to observe themselves. They develop awareness of their own behavioral patterns, emotional triggers, and decision-making processes. This self-awareness prevents them from projecting their own motivations onto others and helps them recognize when their personal biases might be affecting their observations. The art of observation extends beyond face-to-face interactions to digital communications. The master observer can read between the lines of emails, understand the significance of response times, and interpret the emotional undertones in text messages. They notice when someone's communication pattern changes and can often identify underlying issues before they become explicit problems. Environmental observation is equally important. The condition of someone's workspace, the books on their shelves, the way they organize their materials, all these details provide insights into their personality, priorities, and working style. The quiet observer uses this environmental information to understand people more completely and interact with them more effectively. Perhaps most importantly, the art of observation includes knowing when not to act on what you observe. Having insight into people's motivations and concerns doesn't always mean you should immediately address them. Sometimes the most powerful use of observational knowledge is knowing when to wait, when to let situations develop naturally, and when to use your insights strategically rather than immediately. The master of observation ultimately develops what might be called situational intelligence, the ability to understand complex situations quickly and accurately. This intelligence becomes a significant competitive advantage in any field that involves human interaction, from business and politics to education and healthcare. Chapter 9. The Power of Delayed Gratification. In our instant gratification culture, the ability to delay rewards has become a rare and valuable skill. Quiet people naturally excel at delayed gratification because they're comfortable with solitude, focused on long-term goals, and less dependent on immediate social validation. This patience becomes a powerful competitive advantage in a world where most people are optimizing for short-term rewards at the expense of long-term success. The classic demonstration of delayed gratification's power is the Stanford marshmallow experiment, where children who could wait for a second marshmallow rather than eating one immediately showed better life outcomes decades later. But delayed gratification isn't just about childhood self-control. It's a strategic advantage that compounds throughout your career and life. Quiet people understand that the most valuable rewards often require extended periods of effort before they materialize. While others are chasing quick wins and immediate recognition, the quiet achiever can invest time and energy in activities that pay off over longer time horizons. This allows them to pursue opportunities that others abandon because the payoff isn't immediate enough. Consider the difference between building genuine expertise versus acquiring surface-level knowledge. Developing real expertise in any field requires years of focused study and practice. Most people aren't willing to invest this time because the early stages of learning are frustrating and the benefits aren't immediately apparent. But the person who can delay gratification and persist through the challenging early phases eventually develops capabilities that are extremely valuable and difficult to replicate. The same principle applies to relationship building. Genuine professional relationships based on mutual respect and shared value take time to develop. They require consistent, positive interactions, reliability over time, and patience with the natural ups and downs of human relationships. Most people aren't willing to invest this time without seeing immediate returns. But the patient relationship builder eventually develops a network of genuine advocates and collaborators that becomes incredibly valuable. Delayed gratification also applies to financial decisions. The person who can live below their means and invest consistently over time builds wealth through compound returns. While others are spending money on immediate pleasures or status symbols, the patient investor is building assets that generate increasing returns over time. This financial patience creates freedom and options that aren't available to those who optimize for immediate consumption. In business, delayed gratification manifests as the willingness to build sustainable competitive advantages rather than pursuing quick profits. The company that invests in research and development, employee training, and customer relationships might show lower short-term profits than competitors who cut these investments. But over time, these patient investments create stronger market positions and more sustainable success. The psychological benefits of delayed gratification are equally important. People who can delay rewards develop greater emotional regulation, increased self-confidence, and reduced anxiety about future outcomes. They learn to trust their ability to achieve long-term goals, which creates a calm confidence that others find attractive and inspiring. Delayed gratification also protects against impulsive decisions that can derail long-term success. The person who can resist immediate temptations is less likely to make career moves based on short-term frustrations, less likely to abandon projects when they become challenging, and less likely to compromise their values for immediate gains. The practice of delayed gratification requires developing what psychologists call future self-connection, the ability to feel emotionally connected to your future self and to make decisions that benefit that future person, even when they require sacrifice in the present. Quiet people often excel at this because they spend more time in reflection and long-term planning. One practical way to develop delayed gratification skills is through what researchers call implementation intentions, specific plans for how you'll handle tempting situations. Instead of relying on willpower in the moment, you pre-decide how you'll respond when immediate gratification opportunities arise. This pre-planning makes it easier to stick with long-term goals when short-term temptations appear. The compounding effect of delayed gratification becomes increasingly powerful over time. The person who consistently chooses long-term benefits over short-term pleasures eventually reaches a point where their accumulated advantages create opportunities that aren't available to others. Their patience pays off not just in achieving their original goals, but in accessing entirely new levels of possibility. Perhaps most importantly, the practice of delayed gratification develops what might be called strategic patience, the ability to wait for optimal timing rather than settling for the first available opportunity. This patience allows quiet achievers to be selective about the projects they pursue, the jobs they accept, and the relationships they invest in. This selectivity leads to better outcomes and more satisfying experiences. The power of delayed gratification ultimately gives quiet people a significant advantage in any competitive environment. While others are distracted by immediate rewards and quick fixes, the patient achiever can focus on building real value that compounds over time. This focus creates sustainable success that's based on genuine capability rather than temporary advantages. Chapter 10. Building Unshakable Inner Confidence. True confidence doesn't come from external validation or social performance. It comes from an internal foundation of self-knowledge, competence, and purpose that can't be shaken by outside opinions or temporary setbacks. Quiet people have unique advantages in building this unshakable inner confidence because they're less dependent on external feedback and more comfortable with the internal work that real confidence requires. The foundation of inner confidence is self-awareness, truly understanding your strengths, weaknesses, values, and motivations. Many people avoid this deep self-examination because it can be uncomfortable to confront areas where you're lacking or to acknowledge aspects of yourself that don't match your ideal self-image. But quiet people, who are naturally introspective, can use this tendency to build genuine self-knowledge that becomes the bedrock of unshakable confidence. This self-knowledge prevents the kind of confidence that's actually insecurity in disguise. People who don't really know themselves often overcompensate by being overly aggressive, boastful, or defensive. They need constant external validation because they're not sure of their own worth. But the person with genuine self-awareness can be confident without being arrogant because their confidence is based on accurate self-assessment rather than wishful thinking. Inner confidence also comes from competence, the knowledge that you can handle whatever challenges arise. This competence isn't about being good at everything. It's about being excellent at the things that matter most to your goals and having confidence in your ability to learn and adapt when facing new challenges. Quiet people often build this competence through deep work and focused practice rather than through public performance. The development of competence requires what psychologists call mastery orientation, focusing on learning and improvement rather than on looking good or avoiding failure. People with mastery orientation see challenges as opportunities to grow rather than threats to their self-image. This orientation allows them to take on difficult projects, learn from failures, and continuously improve their capabilities. Another crucial component of inner confidence is purpose. Having clear reasons for what you're doing that extend beyond personal gain or recognition. When your actions are aligned with deeper values and meaningful goals, you develop a sense of direction and motivation that doesn't depend on external circumstances. This purpose-driven confidence is more stable and enduring than confidence based on achievements or social status. Quiet people often have advantages in developing purpose-driven confidence because they spend more time in reflection and are less influenced by social pressures to pursue goals that don't align with their authentic interests and values. They can choose paths based on what genuinely matters to them, rather than what looks impressive to others. The building of inner confidence also requires accepting imperfection. Paradoxically, people with the strongest inner confidence are often those who are most comfortable acknowledging their limitations and mistakes. They understand that confidence doesn't require being perfect. It requires being honest about where you are, while maintaining faith in your ability to grow and improve. This acceptance of imperfection protects against the fragile confidence that crumbles when faced with criticism or failure. The person who knows their weaknesses isn't surprised or devastated when those weaknesses are exposed. They can accept feedback, learn from mistakes, and continue moving forward without having their fundamental self-worth shaken. Inner confidence is also built through what researchers call values-based action, consistently making choices that align with your core values, even when those choices are difficult or unpopular. Each time you act in accordance with your values, you strengthen your sense of integrity and self-respect. Over time, this creates a foundation of confidence that's based on your character rather than your circumstances. The practice of values-based action often requires courage, especially when your values conflict with social pressure or immediate self-interest. But the person who consistently chooses integrity over convenience develops a deep sense of self-respect that becomes a source of unshakable confidence. Physical and mental health also contribute to inner confidence. The person who takes care of their body through exercise and nutrition, who manages stress effectively, and who maintains emotional balance has a stronger foundation for confidence than someone who neglects these fundamental aspects of well-being. Quiet people often excel at these self-care practices because they're comfortable with solitary activities like exercise, meditation, and reflection. The development of inner confidence is ultimately about creating independence from external circumstances. When your confidence comes from within, from your values, your competence, your purpose, and your self-knowledge, you become less vulnerable to the opinions of others, less affected by temporary setbacks, and less dependent on external validation for your sense of worth. This inner confidence manifests as what others perceive as calm strength. The person with genuine inner confidence doesn't need to prove themselves constantly or defend their positions aggressively. They can be secure enough to admit when they're wrong, confident enough to ask for help when they need it, and strong enough to stand alone when necessary. The building of unshakable inner confidence is perhaps the most valuable investment a quiet person can make. It provides the foundation for taking risks, pursuing ambitious goals, and creating the kind of impact that comes not from seeking attention but from having something valuable to contribute. Chapter 11. The strategic use of timing. While most people react to events as they happen, quiet people understand one of the most powerful principles of success. Timing is everything. The ability to recognize the right moment to act, to speak, to reveal information, or to make your move can be the difference between success and failure. This mastery of timing comes naturally to those who work in silence because they spend more time observing patterns and waiting for optimal opportunities. Strategic timing begins with understanding that not all moments are created equal. There are moments when people are receptive to new ideas, and moments when they're closed off. There are times when the market is ready for innovation, and times when it's resistant to change. There are periods when organizations are open to transformation, and periods when they're focused on stability. The person who can read these cycles and time their actions accordingly has an enormous advantage. Quiet people excel at timing because they're patient observers rather than impulsive actors. While others rush to take action as soon as they have an idea or see an opportunity, quiet achievers can wait for the conditions to align in their favor. This patience allows them to enter markets at optimal times, approach people when they're most receptive, and present ideas when the audience is most prepared to receive them. Consider how this works in career advancement. The employee who constantly pushes for promotion often creates resistance and resentment, but the quiet worker who observes organizational patterns, understands budget cycles, and recognizes when leadership changes create new opportunities can time their advancement moves for maximum effectiveness. They might wait for their boss to be promoted, creating an opening, or they might time their request to coincide with the completion of a successful project when their value is most obvious. Strategic timing also applies to communication. The same message delivered at different times can have completely different impacts. The person who shares feedback immediately after emotions are high might face defensive reactions, while the person who waits for a calmer moment might find their input is received thoughtfully and acted upon. The quiet communicator learns to recognize these optimal moments and reserves their most important messages for when they'll have maximum impact. In negotiations, timing can determine the outcome more than the actual terms being discussed. The negotiator who can recognize when their counterpart is under pressure, when they're approaching a deadline, or when they're particularly motivated to close a deal, can use this timing to their advantage. The quiet negotiator, who has been observing and gathering information, is often best positioned to recognize these crucial moments. The mastery of timing also involves understanding personal cycles and energy patterns. Everyone has times when they're most creative, most focused, or most influential. Quiet people often develop better awareness of these patterns because they spend more time in self-reflection. They learn to schedule their most important work during their peak performance periods and avoid making crucial decisions when their energy or judgment is compromised. Market timing represents another crucial application of this principle. The entrepreneur who launches a product too early faces a market that isn't ready, too late, and they face established competition. The quiet observer who has been tracking trends, understanding customer needs, and watching competitive landscapes is often best positioned to identify the optimal window for market entry. Timing also applies to relationship building. There are moments when people are open to new connections and moments when they're focused inward. The person who approaches someone for mentorship right after they've achieved a significant success might find them in a generous, sharing mood. The person who tries to build a relationship during a crisis might find the other person too distracted to invest in new connections. The development of timing skills requires what might be called pattern recognition. Successful timing isn't about luck or intuition. It's about understanding the underlying patterns that govern human behavior, market dynamics, and organizational processes. The quiet observer, who pays attention over time, begins to see these patterns and can predict when conditions will be favorable for different types of actions. Strategic timing also involves understanding the concept of kairos, the right or opportune moment for action. This is different from chronological time. It's about the quality of a moment rather than its position on a calendar. The person who can recognize kairos moments and act decisively when they arise often achieves results that seem disproportionate to their efforts. Perhaps most importantly, the mastery of timing requires the discipline to wait for the right moment, even when you're ready to act. This might mean holding back a great idea until the organization is ready to implement it, waiting to launch a product until market conditions are optimal, or delaying a difficult conversation until emotions have cooled. This discipline separates those who achieve good results from those who achieve extraordinary results. The strategic use of timing ultimately gives quiet people a force multiplier for their efforts. Instead of working harder, they work smarter by aligning their actions with favorable conditions. This approach leads to greater success with less stress and fewer conflicts, because they're working with natural patterns rather than against them. Chapter 12. Creating value without seeking credit. One of the most powerful strategies available to quiet people is the ability to create genuine value without needing to receive credit for their contributions. This approach seems counterintuitive in a culture obsessed with personal branding and self-promotion, but it actually creates a unique form of influence and respect that can't be achieved through traditional recognition-seeking behaviors. Creating value without seeking credit works because it addresses a fundamental scarcity in most organizations and relationships: genuine helpfulness without hidden agendas. Most people, consciously or unconsciously, keep score of their contributions and expect reciprocal recognition or rewards. When you consistently provide value without keeping score, you stand out as someone who can be trusted completely, someone whose motivations are pure, someone who genuinely cares about collective success rather than personal advancement. This approach builds what relationship experts call moral authority. When people know that you're not trying to advance your own interests, they're more likely to trust your judgment, seek your advice, and support your initiatives when you do ask for something. The person who consistently helps others without seeking credit eventually builds a reservoir of goodwill that becomes incredibly valuable. Consider the team member who regularly shares useful resources with colleagues, who helps solve problems outside their formal responsibilities, who mentors junior employees without being asked. They might not get immediate recognition for these contributions, but over time they become known as someone who makes everyone around them better. When opportunities for advancement arise, these contributions are remembered even if they weren't formally documented. The strategy also works because it creates what economists call positive externalities, benefits that extend beyond the immediate transaction. When you help someone succeed, they often become more helpful to others, creating a ripple effect of positive behavior. When you share knowledge freely, it often comes back to you, multiplied through the network effects of people building on your insights and sharing their own learning in return. Creating value without seeking credit also protects you from the political dangers of self-promotion. In many environments, people who actively seek recognition are viewed with suspicion or resentment. They're seen as self-serving, potentially manipulative, or overly concerned with appearance rather than substance. But the person who contributes without seeking credit is protected from these negative perceptions, while still building influence through demonstrated value. This approach requires a long-term perspective and confidence in the value of your contributions. You have to trust that quality work will eventually be recognized, that helpful behavior will eventually be rewarded, and that building genuine value is more sustainable than building personal brand recognition. This patience and confidence are natural strengths for many quiet people. The practice also requires developing what might be called intrinsic motivation, finding satisfaction in the work itself rather than in external recognition. When you can derive genuine pleasure from solving problems, helping others succeed, or creating something useful, you become less dependent on external validation for your sense of accomplishment and self-worth. One powerful application of this strategy is what could be called stealth leadership. Instead of seeking formal leadership positions, you can lead through influence by consistently being the person who helps others succeed. You become the one people turn to for advice, the one whose opinion carries weight in important decisions, the one who can get things done even without formal authority. This informal leadership is often more effective and more satisfying than formal positions that come with titles but not genuine influence. The key to creating value without seeking credit is focusing on what serves the larger goal rather than what serves your immediate interests. This might mean sharing credit for successes, promoting others' ideas even when you contributed to them, or taking on unglamorous but important work that others avoid. These actions build long-term credibility and influence, even though they don't provide immediate recognition. This approach also requires learning to measure success differently. Instead of tracking recognition, promotions, or public acclaim, you measure your impact through the success of others, the improvement in processes or systems you've influenced, and the long-term results of your contributions. This perspective shift allows you to find satisfaction in types of success that others might overlook. The strategy becomes particularly powerful when combined with competence and consistency. The person who regularly creates value without seeking credit and demonstrates genuine expertise in their contributions eventually becomes indispensable. Organizations and individuals come to rely on their judgment and assistance, creating a form of influence that's based on demonstrated worth rather than political positioning. Perhaps most importantly, creating value without seeking credit aligns your actions with your authentic self rather than with external expectations. You can focus on doing good work for its own sake rather than worrying about how your actions will be perceived or whether you'll receive appropriate recognition. This authenticity creates a form of personal satisfaction and professional effectiveness that's more sustainable than success based on external validation. The ultimate result is a form of quiet influence that's both powerful and sustainable. You become known not for self-promotion but for genuine contribution, not for taking credit but for delivering results, not for seeking recognition but for creating value that speaks for itself. Chapter 13. The Power of Selective Engagement. In our hyper-connected world, where everyone is expected to have opinions on everything and participate in every conversation, the quiet person's ability to engage selectively becomes a significant strategic advantage. Selective engagement isn't about being antisocial or avoiding responsibility. It's about understanding that your attention and energy are finite resources that should be invested thoughtfully rather than scattered indiscriminately. The foundation of selective engagement is recognizing that not every conversation deserves your participation, not every meeting needs your input, and not every drama requires your attention. Most people feel compelled to engage with everything that crosses their path, but this reactive approach leads to exhaustion, distraction, and diminished effectiveness in the areas that actually matter. Selective engagement begins with developing clear criteria for what deserves your full attention. These criteria might include: does this align with my core responsibilities or goals? Can I add genuine value to this situation? Will engaging here prevent me from focusing on more important priorities? Is this the best use of my time and energy right now? By applying these filters consistently, you can avoid the trap of being busy without being productive. This approach is particularly powerful in workplace environments where meetings, emails, and requests for input can consume entire days without producing meaningful results. The person who can politely decline non-essential meetings, avoid getting drawn into office politics, and focus their engagement on high-impact activities will accomplish more than colleagues who try to participate in everything. Selective engagement also applies to digital communication and social media. While others feel compelled to respond to every email immediately, comment on every social media post, and stay current with every news story, the selectively engaged person can choose which digital conversations deserve their attention and which can be ignored without consequence. The practice requires developing what might be called strategic ignorance, the deliberate choice to remain uninformed about topics that don't serve your goals or responsibilities. This isn't about being uninformed in general, but about being selective about what information you allow into your consciousness. The person who follows every news story, every industry development, and every social media trend may feel informed, but they're often distracted from the focused learning and thinking that creates real expertise. Selective engagement creates several powerful advantages. First, it preserves mental energy for the activities that matter most. Instead of spreading your cognitive resources thin across dozens of minor issues, you can concentrate them on fewer, more important challenges. This focus leads to better decision-making, more creative solutions, and higher quality results. Second, selective engagement enhances your reputation for thoughtfulness and quality. When people know that you don't comment on everything, your opinions carry more weight when you do choose to share them. Your selective participation signals that you've carefully considered whether your input will be valuable, which makes others more likely to listen when you speak. Third, this approach protects you from the emotional drain of constant conflict and drama. Every workplace and social environment has ongoing tensions, disagreements, and interpersonal conflicts. The person who tries to mediate every dispute or participate in every debate becomes emotionally exhausted, but the selectively engaged person can remain above these conflicts, preserving their emotional energy for the relationships and issues that truly matter. The practice of selective engagement also involves learning to say no gracefully but firmly. This might mean declining meeting invitations that don't require your expertise, avoiding social events that don't align with your priorities, or choosing not to engage in debates that are unlikely to be productive. The ability to decline requests politely but consistently protects your time and energy for higher value activities. Selective engagement requires overcoming the fear of missing out and the social pressure to be involved in everything. Many people engage broadly because they're afraid of being left out, appearing antisocial, or missing important opportunities. But the reality is that trying to be everywhere often means being truly present nowhere. The selectively engaged person trades breadth for depth, missing some opportunities while making the most of the ones they choose to pursue. The mastery of selective engagement also involves understanding timing and context. There are times when broad engagement is valuable. During major organizational changes, when building new relationships, or when learning about new fields. But there are also times when narrow focus is more important. When working on crucial projects, during periods of intense learning, or when facing significant challenges that require concentrated effort. Perhaps most importantly, selective engagement allows you to maintain authenticity in your interactions. When you only engage with topics and situations that genuinely interest you or align with your values, your participation is more thoughtful, more passionate, and more valuable. This authentic engagement creates better outcomes than forced participation motivated by social obligation. The power of selective engagement ultimately gives quiet people the ability to maximize their impact while minimizing their stress. By choosing carefully where to invest their attention and energy, they can achieve better results with less effort while maintaining the mental clarity and emotional balance that allows for sustained high performance. Chapter 14. Building Systems for Sustained Excellence. While others rely on motivation, inspiration, or force of will to achieve their goals, quiet people understand that sustained excellence comes from building systems that make success automatic. These systems remove the need for constant decision-making, reduce dependence on temporary emotional states, and create consistent progress toward important objectives regardless of daily fluctuations in energy or motivation. The power of systems lies in their ability to compound small actions into significant results over time. A system isn't just a routine or habit. It's a comprehensive approach that includes processes, tools, feedback mechanisms, and adjustment protocols that work together to produce reliable outcomes. While others are making the same decisions repeatedly and fighting the same battles daily, the systems thinker has automated the path to excellence. Building effective systems begins with understanding the difference between goals and processes. Goals are outcomes you want to achieve. Processes are the repeatable actions that lead to those outcomes. Most people focus too much on goals and too little on processes, which leads to sporadic effort and inconsistent results. The systems approach focuses primarily on perfecting the processes, trusting that good outcomes will follow naturally from good systems. Consider the difference between wanting to be in good physical shape and having a fitness system. The goal-focused person might start exercising intensively when motivation is high, but they'll struggle to maintain consistency when motivation wanes. The systems-focused person designs a sustainable routine, creates environmental supports, establishes tracking mechanisms, and builds flexibility into their approach. Their system continues producing results, even when motivation fluctuates. Effective systems include what engineers call feedback loops, mechanisms that provide information about whether the system is working as intended. Without feedback, you can't know if your efforts are moving you toward your objectives or away from them. The quiet achiever builds measurement and evaluation into their systems, allowing for continuous improvement and course correction. The development of personal systems often begins with what productivity experts call capture and process, reliable methods for collecting ideas, commitments, and information, then systematically deciding what to do with them. While others lose track of important details or feel overwhelmed by the constant influx of information, The systems thinker has processes that ensure nothing important falls through the cracks. Time management systems are particularly crucial for sustained excellence. This goes beyond simple scheduling to include energy management, priority frameworks, and decision-making processes that ensure your most important work gets your best effort. The quiet achiever often excels at this because they're naturally reflective and can design systems that align with their personal rhythms and preferences. Learning systems represent another crucial area. Instead of learning randomly or reactively, the systems thinker creates structured approaches to acquiring new knowledge and skills. This might include regular reading schedules, systematic skill practice, knowledge management systems, and processes for applying new learning to real-world challenges. These learning systems create compound knowledge growth that leads to expertise and innovation. Communication systems ensure that important relationships and professional obligations are maintained consistently. This might include regular check-ins with key colleagues, systematic follow-up processes, organized contact management, and structured approaches to staying connected with your network. While others maintain relationships through random interactions and occasional bursts of activity, the systems thinker builds consistent touchpoints that strengthen relationships over time. The key to effective systems is starting small and building gradually. Many people fail at systems thinking because they try to systematize everything at once, creating complexity that's impossible to maintain. The successful systems builder identifies one area where consistent improvement would have the biggest impact, designs a simple system for that area, and gradually expands to other areas once the first system is working reliably. Systems also require what might be called ruthless simplicity. Complex systems are difficult to maintain and more likely to break down when circumstances change. The best systems are often elegantly simple, with clear processes that can be followed even when energy is low or motivation is lacking. The quiet achiever understands that sustainability is more important than sophistication. Another crucial aspect of systems building is creating what psychologists call implementation intentions. Specific plans for how you'll respond to predictable challenges or obstacles. Instead of relying on willpower in difficult moments, you pre-decide how you'll handle common situations that could derail your system. This preparation makes it easier to maintain consistency, even when facing setbacks. Environmental design is also crucial for effective systems. Your physical and digital environment should support your systems rather than fighting against them. This might mean organizing your workspace to minimize distractions, setting up your phone to reduce interruptions, or arranging your schedule to protect your most productive hours. The quiet achiever often excels at creating environments that support deep work and consistent performance. The maintenance and evolution of systems requires regular review and adjustment. What works in one situation or life phase might not work in another. The systems thinker builds review processes into their systems, regularly evaluating what's working, what isn't, and what needs to be modified. This continuous improvement approach ensures that systems remain effective as circumstances change. Perhaps most importantly, building systems for sustained excellence requires a long-term perspective and patience with the process. Systems often take time to show results, and there may be periods where the benefits aren't immediately obvious. But the quiet achiever who can persist through these initial phases eventually reaches a point where their systems create momentum that makes excellence feel effortless. The ultimate result is a form of sustainable high performance that doesn't depend on exceptional effort or perfect conditions. Through well-designed systems, the quiet achiever can produce consistent results while others struggle with motivation, distraction, and inconsistency. Chapter 15. Your silent transformation begins now. Everything you've learned in this journey about the power of working in silence comes down to this moment, the decision to begin your own silent transformation. You now understand that the greatest achievements in history weren't created by the loudest voices in the room, but by the quiet minds that focused on substance over spectacle, depth over drama, and results over recognition. The path of silent power isn't about becoming antisocial or avoiding human connection. It's about understanding that your most valuable contributions often happen away from the spotlight, that your deepest growth occurs in solitude, and that your greatest influence comes not from commanding attention, but from commanding respect through consistent excellence. Your silent transformation begins with a fundamental shift in how you measure success. Instead of counting likes, shares, or public acknowledgements, you'll measure progress through competence gained, relationships deepened, systems improved, and value created. This internal scorecard frees you from the exhausting cycle of seeking external validation and allows you to focus on building real worth rather than just apparent worth. The first step in your transformation is developing comfort with your own company. In a world addicted to constant stimulation and social interaction, the ability to be alone with your thoughts becomes a superpower. Start by creating daily periods of complete silence. No phones, no music, no podcasts, just you and your thoughts. These moments of solitude will initially feel uncomfortable if you're not used to them, but they'll gradually become your most productive and peaceful times. Begin implementing the strategic principles you've learned. Practice selective engagement by choosing carefully which meetings to attend, which conversations to join, and which projects to pursue. Use the power of observation to understand the dynamics around you before acting. Apply delayed gratification by choosing long-term benefits over short-term pleasures. Build systems that automate your path to excellence rather than relying on motivation alone. Your transformation will require developing new communication patterns. Learn to listen more than you speak, to ask questions instead of making statements, to pause before responding, and to use silence as a form of communication. Practice the art of saying more with fewer words, of making your contributions count rather than making them frequently. Create value without seeking credit. Look for opportunities to help others succeed, to solve problems behind the scenes, to share knowledge freely, and to contribute to collective goals without keeping score. This approach will initially feel strange if you're used to ensuring your contributions are noticed, but it will eventually build a form of influence that's both powerful and sustainable. Invest in deep work capabilities. Design your environment to minimize distractions, protect blocks of time for focused effort, and develop the ability to maintain concentration for extended periods. This skill will become increasingly valuable as the world becomes more distracted and fragmented. Build your invisible network through genuine relationships based on mutual value rather than transactional exchanges. Focus on being useful to others, remembering important details about their lives and work, and maintaining consistent positive interactions over time. These relationships will become more valuable than any formal networking could achieve. Develop emotional intelligence and self-awareness through regular reflection and honest self-assessment. Understand your strengths and weaknesses, your values and motivations, your patterns and triggers. This self-knowledge will allow you to operate more effectively and authentically in all areas of your life. Practice patience with the process. Your silent transformation won't happen overnight, and there will be times when it seems like others are advancing faster through more visible means. Trust in the compound effect of consistent, quiet work, knowing that sustainable success is built through steady accumulation of competence and value rather than dramatic gestures. Master the art of timing by developing pattern recognition skills and learning to wait for optimal moments to act, speak, or reveal your capabilities. This strategic patience will allow you to maximize the impact of your efforts and minimize unnecessary conflicts or resistance. Build unshakable inner confidence through competence, self-knowledge, and alignment with your values. This internal foundation will allow you to operate independently of external circumstances and to maintain your direction even when facing criticism or setbacks. As you embark on this transformation, remember that the goal isn't to become invisible or to avoid all social interaction. The goal is to become selective, strategic, and authentic in how you engage with the world. You're not hiding your light under a bushel, you're choosing when and how to let it shine for maximum impact. Your silent transformation is ultimately about reclaiming your power from a world that wants to distract you, about choosing depth over breadth, quality over quantity, and substance over style. It's about understanding that in a noisy world, silence has become the ultimate competitive advantage. The path of silent power isn't easy, but it's profound. It requires patience, discipline, and the courage to be different in a world that rewards conformity. But for those who choose this path, the rewards are extraordinary. Genuine influence, sustainable success, and the deep satisfaction that comes from knowing your achievements are built on solid foundations rather than temporary trends. Embrace the identity shift that this transformation requires. You're no longer someone who needs to be the loudest voice in the room to be heard. You're becoming someone whose quiet presence commands attention, whose rare words carry weight, whose consistent actions build unshakable influence. This isn't about becoming a different person. It's about becoming the most powerful version of who you already are. Start your transformation with these immediate actions. For the next 30 days, commit to speaking 20% less in meetings and conversations. Use that extra mental energy to observe and understand what's really happening around you. Choose one area of your life where you can begin working more systematically and less reactively. Create a daily period of complete silence where you can think, plan, and reconnect with your deepest goals. Identify one relationship where you can begin creating value without keeping score. Look for one opportunity to help someone succeed without any expectation of recognition or return. Find one project or skill where you can apply deep work principles, going deeper rather than broader in your focus. These small shifts will begin rewiring your brain for silent power. Picture your life 12 months from now, after you've fully embraced the power of working in silence. You wake up each day with clear purpose, unburdened by the need to prove yourself to others. Your reputation is built on substance rather than style, on results rather than rhetoric. People seek your advice because they trust your judgment, not because you've promoted yourself as an expert. Your influence extends far beyond your immediate circle because your quiet work creates ripple effects that benefit everyone around you. Your relationships are deeper and more meaningful because they're based on genuine connection rather than social performance. Your work is more impactful because you've learned to focus your energy on what truly matters rather than scattering it across endless distractions. Your confidence is unshakable because it's built on competence and character rather than external validation. Your success is sustainable because it's based on systems and principles rather than luck or timing. You've discovered that the greatest power isn't in commanding attention, but in commanding respect. You've learned that the most influential people are often the quietest ones in the room. You've experienced the profound satisfaction that comes from creating value without needing credit, from building excellence without seeking applause, from leading through example rather than through volume. Your silent transformation begins now, with the next choice you make, the next word you don't say, the next moment you choose to observe rather than perform. The power of working in silence is now yours to harness. Use it wisely and watch as your quiet strength becomes an unstoppable force for achievement and influence. The world is drowning in noise, distraction, and meaningless chatter. It's hungry for substance, depth, and authentic value. You have the opportunity to provide what the world needs most. The rare combination of competence and humility, of strength and silence, of power and purpose. Your quiet revolution doesn't just transform your own life. It transforms every life you touch through your example. The age of loud, empty self-promotion is ending. The age of quiet, powerful contribution is beginning. And it starts with you, right now, in this moment. Stop talking about what you're going to do. Start doing it. Stop seeking recognition for your potential. Start building your reality. Stop making noise about your dreams. Start working silently toward your destiny. The world needs more people who understand that true power doesn't announce itself. It simply works, steadily and silently, creating value that speaks louder than any words ever could. Your silent revolution starts today. Your transformation begins now. Your power awaits your silence.